Well, hello everyone, and I want to introduce our speaker for the next session. The session is calculating how much your university spends on open access and what to do about it. Our presenter will be one of the co-founders of our research, Heather Piwawar. I hope I pronounced that relatively close to right. Please refer to Schedule for a complete biography of our speakers. We will be using the Zoom Q&A for questions during the session. Afterwards, please also participate in our online discussion forum, which can be located at the NASIG website with additional questions or comments about this session. NASIG's Code of Conduct applies to all discussions and presentations. The links to the forum and Code of Conduct are available on the NASIG website. Please tweet about this session using the hashtag NASIG2020. We would also like to thank the NASIG sponsors for helping us make our online conference freely available.
Awesome, thank you very much. So, yep, my name's Heather Pivovar. The W's are pronounced like V's usually, but I am really forgiving. I know it's a challenging one. And I am indeed one of the co-founders of the nonprofit called Our Research. This is me. There's a picture here of me so that one day when we are actually in the same place, you can stop me and say hi. And this is my co-founder, Jason Preem, the other half of what we do. So our goal for today is to talk about how much money your university is paying in open access fees. You might be familiar with Unpay. It's a database of open access links that our company made and rolled out about 2 or 3 years ago, I think. If you don't think you've heard of Unpay, you might actually be using it already. It is the main source of open access links in Web of Science, Scopus, ProQuest, probably your link resolver. And if you're not using it in your link resolver right now, you should. It's free and helps people get access to things that you aren't subscribed to. Anyway, that Unpay database is built by pulling together green OA, gold OA, hybrid OA, bronze, metadata from Crossref, and so on. We are a nonprofit, it's open source, open data, and open infrastructure. And the reason I'm telling you all this is I think it helps to know there's different kind of vendors, right? And so in some ways we're a vendor, but we're really trying to be entirely on the side of libraries. Our goal is really to bring about a more open science and open research future. And also that's my cred for what I know about open access. So let's dive in a little further. Based on this open access data that we pulled together with Unpay, we have made a few different, we've published a few different papers looking at the adoption of open access. So this graph here on the left is the growth in the number of articles that are open access, and on the right is the percentage of things that are open access, and those colors are just different kinds of open access. And as you can see, the amount of open access is growing. That paper is from the State of OA, in case you want to dive into it more deeply. We more recently made a preprint on the future of open access where it looks ahead and projects out. So the slightly gray area here, the slightly muted area, is projecting out 5 years. And right now, the amount of open access uses, sorry, these graphs are articles, but we also look at uses in that paper. About half of all uses of articles are open access, and that's going up to 70% in the next 5 years. So this is a really growing thing to look at. We are at a tipping point. And surely you've all heard at this point lots of buzz about open access deals and how they play in. So this one about the Cambridge University Press and the University of California, UC dropping Elsevier, for example, PLOS and UC, there's just more and more of these coming out. And that is surely why you're in this session. And we want to think about that from what it looks like for your authors. Because some of that is just from the, what does it look like from your authors? Because where is the money? Because not all the money comes through the university's OA funds. They're funding it in a variety of ways, as we will look into. So different ways of looking at, so we want to look at how we're looking at it from the authors, but we also want to look at across your whole university, how much is being spent by the authors, whether the authors are finding that from your university OA funds, whether they're finding it from their research grants, from their personal pocket, from a variety of sources. People are hobbling together money to pay, but we want to help you understand how much is being paid by all the authors in your university. So 2 previous ways to do that were to look at just gold open access. And there's a reference there. That's relatively easy. A different way is to look at university accounting data. That can be a really good way, but your university has to have put in the effort ahead of time to track all of that, which a lot of universities have done in Europe, but not very many in the US. And so that means it leaves those of us who haven't put in that infrastructure yet with the challenge of measuring the amount of money spent on gold as well as hybrid OA if you don't have that accounting data. Let me just take a minute to define those gold and hybrid terms if you're not familiar with them. So there's a bunch of different kinds of open access, as you probably know, and they tend to be given slightly confusing color names. So the one that we're not talking about here, because it is free for authors, is green open access, and that's when a paper is deposited in an institutional or disciplinary repository. So that's a kind that we're not measuring because that is free for the authors and for the institutions other than the process of maintaining repositories and so on. What we are talking about is gold and hybrid OA. Both those kinds are open access that is hosted on the publisher site, and both those kinds are ones that are licensed open access. So either with a Creative Commons license or in publisher specific license, they are flagged as open access, so they won't be they're not promotional OA. They won't become un-OA by the publishers later on. And that means that often, not always, but often, there is an article processing charge or an APC that is paid upfront at the time of publication to pay for the hosting of the article in lieu of subscription charges. The difference between gold and hybrid is that a gold open access article is published in a journal that's 100% open access, and a hybrid open access article is one that's published in a toll access journal where often a majority of the other articles are available by subscription. Okay. So it's easy, the good news is, to figure out how much money is being paid on open access for you, so we can have extra time to eat ice cream. We can wrap this up early. All we need to do is multiply together the number of papers that your authors publish as open access times how much it costs for them to publish there. Now let's get into the details, because of course it's not so easy. So the number of papers that your authors publish is open access. This is complicated, not only because researchers can have multiple affiliations, but just there hasn't been a well-applied standard for tagging affiliation data to authorship and then tracking that all the way through the publication process. So we'll look at that in a bit more detail, but figuring out who your authors are is not actually simple. Publish is open access. So figuring out all of the articles that are open access hasn't traditionally been the easiest thing to do as well. How much it costs them to publish there. So who is paying is complicated, as we'll see. So all of that is not easy. And then the truth is, for most of the reasons you want to know how much your university is paying in open access, you're not actually interested in it for historical reasons. You're interested in it to make decisions about the future. And that means that you actually want to predict and project and forecast out. And then that gets into a host of other issues. So it's all of that glorious complexity that we're going to dig into right now. Okay, let's do it. So to break it down, these are the steps we're going to cover. Which papers, how much money, and then doing a bit of forecasting. I'm going to cover this relatively quickly. Please do reach out if you've got questions after this session, and I'm always interested in questions. You're welcome to email me afterwards as well. Okay, let's start off. Which papers? What's open access? So there's different sources of open access data. OneFinder, Scopus, Web of Science, Dimensions, and Unpay. OneFinder is a source of open access data. They're currently owned by Elsevier. So there's some complexities in getting your open access from that source. Scopus, Web of Science, and Dimensions, actually you get their open access data from Unpay. And so the Unpay database is a good source. So just to, is actually the industry leading source for that, whether directly or indirectly through these other databases. So that's where we can get open access. It's actually not as complicated as it was 5 or 10 years ago, which is great news. Affiliations are also getting easier, but not easy yet. So where to get affiliation data? You can get it, as you probably know, out of Web of Science, Scopus, Dimensions, Lens, and Microsoft Academic Graph. Now, some of those databases are subscription only, so they're pretty great, but you can only use it if you've got a subscription to them. That would be Web of Science and Scopus. Dimensions, I think you can only get limited affiliation data out of it with a free subscription, and otherwise you need to pay. Lens and Microsoft Academic Graph are free, which is great. You might not have heard of Microsoft Academic Graph before. It's a lot like Google Scholar, but Google Scholar's put a lot of emphasis on its user interface, and that's why lots of us know about it, because it's easy to go and use as someone who wants to query. What Microsoft has done instead is they've put a focus on their database, and they actually have their data out freely available for anybody to use and build on, which is fantastic. So that Microsoft Academic Graph data, that affiliation data, is available for others to build on. And then the question is, what affiliation data, a different question is, what affiliation data are they actually getting? So it's often encoded in Crossref, and you want it to be normalized, right? So that different ways that people describe your institution are all captured. And there are a few different standardization, few different standards. Grid was an original one, and the standard VOR is taking over from it. Is it? Yeah, here. So you can see at the top, just go to VOR.org and you can search up your institution, and then you can see your VOR ID. It's the thing right after the slash there. You can click and see all the detail it's got for you. So that is a that's a standard that's coming into its own now and is really helping with a lot of this work. Okay, so that's a really quick overview of open access and affiliation. Now let's start talking about money. So APC costs. Where can you get the cost of an APC? Oh, sorry about that. And again, an APC stands for an article processing charge. So it's the amount of money that a researcher or a group of researchers has to pool together to pay the publisher to make that article open access on their journal page. So one source is publisher pages, and then there's a few other sources that have pulled that together. So publisher pages, here's what it looks like on Elsevier's page, their open access price list. Here's what it looks like on Wiley's page. Now you can see on Wiley's page, it looks complicated. That's because it's complicated. Even getting the article, article publication charges, even getting those directly from the publisher, it depends on a number of variables. But beyond the list price, it gets even more complicated. So transformative agreements, as you might know, these are agreements, sometimes called read and publish agreements, that can give researchers a different price on open access, either now or in the future. And so there is a list, there's a place that's trying to pull together all these transformative agreements at ESAC. Though frankly, for your institution, you'll probably know what transformative agreements you're in, so you don't necessarily need a list. But there's where you can go and see what other people have been up to. More relevantly, in some ways, more directly relevantly, are all of these open access agreements. One of them just came out a few days ago, as you might have seen, the PLOS and the Carnegie Mellon one. And so again, these you'll know if your institution is in an open access agreement. and that will affect the amount of price that people pay. But actually, this is usually used as the end step for the calculations that we're doing to negotiate one of these. So we'll talk about it a little bit more at the end. More relevantly and tougher to work in is author perks. So some journals will lower an APC rate or give people a free voucher or something if they have society memberships or have done editor reviewer activities or so on. Now, those are really hard to track. Practically impossible, I think, unless you've got that sort of built into your accounting system. So I think that just counts as a limitation and something that you could get at with a survey potentially to your faculty. But otherwise, just know that it's a complexity that's going on behind the scenes. As if that weren't enough, the evidence suggests that researchers are actually paying for the APCs from a variety of sources. So they're pulling together some data from their research grants, some from their institutional funds and so on. And so that makes it complicated to know what the price is that they're given for some of those affiliations and then where the money is coming from. This graph is from a study that is worth having a look at. I've got a further reading slide at the end that calls this one out as well, but it's looking at who actually pays the APCs, which is a different issue than how much money is being paid, but obviously a relevant one. Okay, that I think it was that study that said it noted it was a bureaucratic headache, which I think we don't need to tell you, and that resourcing within the library is the biggest obstacle to keeping a really accurate count on that. But I think that one principle which I think is holding true is that for a given institution, the current list price is a good start. Be aware of these limitations, quantify them if you can, but starting with the current list price is reasonable. Okay, the allocation of the APC cost is another thorny one. Specifically, which author pays. So again, that APC stands for article processing charge. It's an amount of money like $1,000 or $2,000 that needs to be paid for the article to be published. But an article might have 1, 2, 3, 4, 100 authors. In that case, which institution is paying that charge? Or to look at it the other way, if you are a university trying to figure out whether should you consider that open access article is something that an author from your institution paid the APC charge for. And in real life, usually, so there's not much data on this, there's a little bit, which I'll point to, but usually one author, it seems, pays the fee, and then they split out from a different set of from a different set of sources. But which author that is varies. There's no standard at all. It is often the corresponding author, and the corresponding author, it is often the corresponding author, partly because the corresponding author is the one who in many fields is considered the senior author and the one with the funding. So those things tend to go together. But in some places, especially with this APC rates, they might make the corresponding author, with these APC agreements. There's a chance I think people might make the corresponding author the one that whose university has a OA fund. So that would be more complicated. So figuring out which author pays, it's not documented in Crossref, it's not written down anywhere. So the question is what to do then? Do we just throw our hands up? And the answer is no, we try a whole bunch of math. So you don't have to understand all this math, but we can make guesses. We can model a few different scenarios. For let's say it's always the first author. Let's say it's always the last author. Let's say it's always the corresponding author. Let's assign the APC to each university equally each university who has an author on the list. So those are some different models that are represented here. The good news is when you apply those models to looking at the OA spend across a lot of papers for one given university, it ends up not making a very big difference who you allocate the APC rate to. The amount of money that a university pays across all of their authors and all of their papers tends to be about the same, whichever of the methods you use. So that's all these different colors are very clustered together here. That's what that's showing. Now they're not as clustered together here, because this is averaging together fewer papers. So if you are a relatively small university with fewer OA publications, it might make more of a difference to you. But still, you'll get in the right ballpark, as I think you can see here. This is a different study, again, looking at different scenarios and ways of paying in different universities. And I'm going back to this because I think I'm spending a little bit of time on this because I think it can be a stumbling block for people who think they don't know who paid and what can they figure out from that. And I think the answer is modeling something will get you in the right ballpark right now. And just one reminder that the things that we're looking at right now are mostly for hybrid publishing. Publishers like PLOS and eLife tend to have good metadata themselves about who's the corresponding author, and they've done a lot of this in affiliation slice and dicing. So I would reach out directly to them and talk with them about getting estimates about whether your people affiliated with your university have been the ones paying, because they often have better data on that than the toll access publishers. Okay, we're working our way through the complications. So the next one is growth in costs. This one matters. The black line here, you can see over time, the black line is article processing charges as measured by the Open APC database. And you can see it's going up, up, up. There, the last one, it goes down a little. But it's going up much faster than inflation. Those two lines at the bottom are inflation. So you can see that if you are looking historically, or if you're trying to project into the future, thinking about the rates at which APCs are growing makes a big difference. And unfortunately, I don't have any more insight than that, other than it matters. And so finally, the growth in number of open access papers also matters, because if you're just looking at the number of papers that your faculty are publishing right now, it's not taking into account that they will be publishing more in the future. A higher percentage of their articles are likely to be open access in the years ahead if trends keep going the way they have been going. Okay, so that's an overview of the complications. And so let's make it real and talk about some practical ways to look at your APC spend. So this Open APC database is worth clicking around. It's pretty cool. So here you can see, so it is made from universities who report their open access spend to this database. And so you can see here a breakdown by publisher. Here's a breakdown by journal, just hybrid journals, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, it's almost all European universities. So here's the US ones. There's only really 4 that are contributing. So this is hopefully giving you a peek into the future, hopefully, as we become more mature in our thinking about all of this and our data around this will start to be populated and be a good source for your own data or comparing to other universities. Right now, it's not, but it is worth, if you're in the US, but it is worth poking on. And I should say I'm in Canada, so in the US or Canada. It's pretty sparse for Canada too, unfortunately. Okay, so now I'm going to talk a little bit about the tool that we've built. And it is also open source, open data, and so on, built on paywall data. And it's the reason that I focused on this and know what I know and what I'm telling you about is because I've been learning it to build this tool Unsub. And so it uses the APC data for your institution. We get it from that open data set of Microsoft Academic Graph and MAG, as people often call it, map authors to grid IDs, their affiliations to grid IDs, and then grid IDs to RORs. So we get your ROR and then figure out from that what papers your authors wrote and how long the authorship list was for each paper and so on. The source of open access data that we use is not surprisingly Unpay. The APC approaches, we are looking at hybrid and gold publication, and we are looking at them mostly for toll access publishers. Their hybrid and their gold journals, because of course, even Elsevier and Wiley do have some gold OA journals, and you can want to know how much your institution's spending on those. And the approach that we use for figuring out the distribution of that open access charge across institutions is fractional authorship. So specifically, the number of authors from for any given paper, the number of authors from your institution divided by the number of authors total for that paper is the percentage of that paper that we considered authored by your institution. Yeah. And then we sum that up over all papers in that journal that are open access. And that gets an estimate of the number of the fractional open access charge across all papers in that journal. So I'm not going to go into the gory details of that, but I do have a video up there on Vimeo you can look into, and it goes into some of the examples in math on that fractional authorship. And I can walk you through it here a little bit. So this is a screenshot of Unsub. It is this publication charge page, and it is real data from a real US institution. If you scroll down a little bit, oh, it's not on this one. Okay, well, let's use the Electrochimica Acta. Wow, I bet somebody is laughing right now because I don't know how to pronounce that, but it's true I don't. Okay, so it's a hybrid journal. The APC price in 2019 was $3,230 US. We think that the authors in this institution have published 0.8 papers that charge an APC. So what does that mean? That means they might have been on one paper with 10 authors, where 8 of them were from this institution. So that means that we are assigning 80% of that APC to this institution for this paper. And then the total fractional authorship is looking back over the last 5 years. If you sum everything together and average it out, what's the total fractional authorship? And we multiply that by that 3,230 to get an estimate that over the last 5 years, on average, $2,261 were spent by authors from this university to Elsevier for publishing hybrid in this journal. Now, so this is doing a lot of that complicated work for you behind the scenes. It is a pretty early rollout, so it is not yet taking into account growth in the APC fee over the next 5 years, or growth of open access rates of papers over the next 5 years. Those enhancements will come out in the next few months, hopefully, but it's getting going on doing the beginning of these calculations for you. Okay, so that's the published side of Unsub. I will give you a very quick overview about the open access on the subscription side as well, mostly just to whet your appetite so that you know what Unsub can do here and how it relates to, so you can dig in more deeply later on if you want to. So, and because the amount of open access is growing, that's relevant for your authors who are publishing, but it's also obviously relevant to you who's trying to fulfill reading requirements from your campus. increasingly the uses that people need to make are open access, and that means that you shouldn't be paying for them. And so we want to help make sure that you're making subscription decisions where that are informed by the amount of open access and the amount of backfile and so on that you already have. So this is a quick screenshot of the subscription side of Unsub. It's looking at it, the free demo that you can check out is all the papers in this institution's Elsevier big deal. What would it look like if they walked away from their big deal, if they canceled it, and only subscribed to 201 subscriptions instead? And those 201 subscriptions, those 201 journals were chosen as the most cost-effective journals, where cost-effective is calculated in terms of cost per use, which is standard, and then a slightly enhanced form of cost per use that takes into account open access and takes into account backfile, the cost of ILL and so on. So that's what we're modeling here. And as you can see, 35% of the uses over the next 5 years we predict will be open access at the time of use. So a third of what this campus uses over the next 5 years, they don't need to pay for. It's already open access. Another quarter of it will come from the backfile, we estimate, and then you get to decide what percent of that comes from subscription if you break that bundle and just subscribe a la carte. So that's basically what the Unsub subscription side is letting you see. You can dig into the gory details of each of the journals, and you can add more columns and search and sort and so on. You can look at the usage and cost there and the open access percentage for each journal. There's a lot of parameters because we've designed it so that you can set up the assumptions to both model what you value and is true on your campus. So for example, how much is the cost of fulfilling an ILL request on your campus is a parameter that you can set. And also, do you want to include bronze OA, for example, in your estimates? Bronze OA is a type of OA that's more transient than gold or hybrid. So it's on the publisher page, but it doesn't have an open license. It's actually all the stuff that's up with COVID. So do you want to include, that kind of open access that publishers can take down, or do you want to exclude it? So you can look at different scenarios and modeling with that parameter set true or false. So that's a really brief overview of Unsub. It's at unsub.org. Have a look. It's really easy to get started. All you need with your own customized dashboard, all you need is a counter file, and then we figure out your ROR, your ID, and we go look in that Microsoft Academic Graph for all your affiliations. We bring the open access data from Unpay and so on. Custom subscription is $1,000 a year, and we think it'll save you way more than that. 300 libraries are using it. So it just came out in November, and it was called Unpay Journals before, and it's had both that read and publish side the whole time. People don't talk about it out loud using it very much, but a lot of libraries are. SUNY has talked about using Unsub as Unpay Journals, and they're saving $5 million with it and say it's really changed the conversation for them. So encourage you to check it out. It is a way to get started in solving some of these problems, and we'd love your feedback. We really want to make, excuse me, just a second. Sorry, I'm gonna take a sip. We really want to make this tool useful for you. So, so do tell us what you think is important for next features and so on. So that's the quick overview on how to calculate APC spend at your university. And now the question would be, what should you do about it? And so I'd like to suggest there's 3 things. Raise your eyebrows, raise your hands and your voices, and raise your expectations. So basically, raise your eyebrows is question and learn, just like you're doing right now. Learn about your own OA spend. Raise your voice. Talk and learn about what others have done. What others have done in terms of negotiating, in terms of all of the things we're going to talk about actually in a minute. Some places you can do that are in the question session of this conversation that we're about to have, in the Core 2020 presentation submissions, which are due tomorrow, it could be a great time to put in a panel session if you get on it today. The Unsub user discussion group is a place where we're really hoping some of these conversations can start being had accessibly and openly with everyone. So you don't sort of need to be in a clique to be part of the conversation, but we can all be talking about what are different ways to do these estimates and what we can learn. And love to hear your ideas in question time or chat. And finally, raise your expectations. So negotiate, make deals, negotiate on hybrid journals with the data that you've got about what your university is spending on open access. Use it to inform a read and publish agreement or a publish and publish agreement like these ones coming out with PLOS. Plan around APC funds or awards, and generally just be an expert about this topic on your campus. Remember, be bold, change is afoot. You're on the right side of history to be paying good attention to this right now. So go for it. Here's some additional reading and we'll make these slides available. And thanks a lot. Love to hear your questions.
Hi, Heather. This is Maria. So far, we have a few questions in the question and answer section. The first one, I'm wondering if you account in Unsub that Counter 5 usage now excludes Gold OA. I'm trying to understand the data that I'm looking at.
Yeah, good question. So right now, Unsub is only Counter 4, and we are moving to Counter 5, but we're taking our time to do it to make sure that we do get the differences. It's not just, as you point out, it's not just a formatting issue. The data is actually different, right? And so we're looking at using the TRJ3, I think it's called, that does include the Gold OA stats. Yeah, so happy to talk more about that offline. Right now we're using Counter 4. We rolled out in November when Counter 5 wasn't broadly applicable. And so we'll be transitioning to Counter 5 in the next couple of months. Okay. And I think I'll know more about it then.
Okay. Heather, could you move back a slide?
Yes. Good idea. There you go. And we'll make these available. You don't need to write them down.
And we also have a question, what kinds of assurances can you give about how you'll use our counter data now and in the future?
Yep, good question. So we use standard industry tools like Amazon databases and things like that with standard security. So from a security perspective, that's as secure as we are. And then in terms of will we sell your data to anyone? Will we make it publicly available without your agreement? No, not at all. That's not at all what we're about. Yeah, and so I believe that our terms of service say that, and if they don't, and you want written assurance, that we're more than happy to give it. Similarly, our nonprofit is a nonprofit so that it itself cannot be acquired. And so we've written down some things about that too, because that's really important to us.
Okay. Let's see, going down the list. Does this take grant funding into account? So as the library is doing the modeling, can it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. Yeah, it does not. So right now, it does not look at who is paying the fee. So it's looking at what fees are being paid, but it's not looking at who's paying. So it's not looking at what percentage of it is being paid by the NSF grants or by personal funds or something. Yeah.
Hi, I work for a publisher. If we were to make a full cost report available, can you talk on how that would change the difficult landscape you've outlined?
Yeah, I think that if publishers, I think it would be amazing, fantastic, if publishers made publicly available how much different institutions are paying for open access, and made sort of the drill down information available so it's trustworthy. I think so publishers have promised that there won't be double dipping, where double dipping in this context would be not the ice cream context, but double dipping in this context would be people paying for open access, but then paying again, for example, for hybrid papers through subscription. And they've promised that, but it's really hard for libraries to like trust them and hold that accountable and know that that's true. So I think that if publishers made the lists of available, that would be amazing. In the past, they have not been very good at keeping track of what's hybrid and so on in the metadata that they release. And so making that data available where people can examine it and point out errors and so on, I think would be fantastic and go a long way to rebuilding some trust.
Great. Okay. Next question. Do you or anyone know if when a library cancels its big deals to save on subscription costs, does the university then start transferring some of the APC costs from a department's budget to the library's budget?
When they cancel a big deal, is that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it really depends how your university sets it up, because there's no rules about that. It's all about your university's processes. And for example, the University of California has walked away from their Elsevier agreement, and at the same time they put some work into some open access funds and processes and so on. But others haven't. Others have said, we walk away from our big deal. We're maybe subscribing to some journals a la carte, and open access continues to be done the same way it's always done. And so I think it's really up to your institution.
Okay. Do you have a date when you plan to be moving to Counter 5?
Yeah, good question. I think in the next 2 months. Yeah.
Okay. What are the plans to add other publishers?
Yeah, so it supports Elsevier and Wiley right now. Springer Nature in the next week or 2 or 3, and others after that. Our goal is all publishers by the end of the year in the order that they're most requested by our customers. And so the Google group is a place, here I'm going to go back another slide. There we go, that Google group right there with Unsub Discuss. Even if you're not a customer right now, but you want to let us know what you're most interested in, we'd love to hear what publishers you'd like to support, and that will influence our priority.
Okay. How often is Unsub content updated?
Yep, good question. So it's updated very often in terms of small enhancements to the model and bug fixes and so on. We try to have the numbers be fairly stable though, because people are making decisions based on them. And so we have an announce group, I think it's linked to from this discuss group, where we post when the data changes. And so, yeah, so it changes relatively often, but with relatively small changes. Except sometimes I think, for example, we're going to be modeling the growth in journals soon, and that will be a slightly bigger change. So we'll give people a heads up and know. We understand that changes we're trying to balance the fact that stable data is good, but also the most accurate data is good, and do that.
And then Elizabeth had a second question. Does Unsub provide reports to users, or is it up to us to design and harvest our own reports? And she says many thanks for this.
So all of the data is exportable in a spreadsheet format right now as a CSV. So you can use it to design your own reports if you want to. We are also really committed to making an API. So if you've got some techies and they want to get access to it, they can. We also have a feature that's coming soon on the app right now that's a public, or that's a communication page. And that isn't actually live right now. We're working with people to figure out what they want there. And so the intent of that is indeed reports for your admin or for your faculty. And so we'd love to hear from you on this Google group, for example, about what you'd like to see. How comfortable, for example, are you showing real numbers there, detailed numbers, or do you want them just classified as high, medium, low? that sort of thing. So yep, we're in the midst of designing that, but we also think it's important. It's your data and you should be able to use it as widely as you want to. Interestingly, I think that one figure data, our understanding is once you buy that, you're not really even allowed to redistribute that within your own campus, let alone to anybody else. And that's a really different approach than we take.
Okay, that actually covers our questions.
One person had a hand up, and I'm not sure if she has a question. Marcia? Okay, perhaps not. And I was wondering if Sarah, our previous presenter, wanted to say anything, because she added a lot during chat.
Hi, can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Thanks. No, it was a great presentation. I just wanted to provide some context from the publisher side about the nightmare that some of this stuff is. So the battles around disambiguation, author affiliation, who's actually spending, does the funder, let's say you could associate the funder with the author, does that actually mean the funder paid? We are in the midst of helping all the libraries we're talking to figure this out. And so there's quite often a back and forth where we'll provide, here's everything you published with us in the last couple of years, here's the waiver rates for folks who couldn't pay APCs, here's the spend. And you'd love in a perfect world that you just multiply the papers by the APCs and boom, it all lines up. And the numbers rarely line up that well. And then you add the institutional disambiguation component and blah, blah, blah. So just wanted to reiterate the challenge, certainly from the PLOS side. I can't speak to other publishers, and I'm more than happy to answer questions about how we're trying to tackle that. But institutional disambiguation and author affiliation become critical when you're thinking about shifting cost from the library to the authors, depending on whatever APC model you're using. Hope that's helpful.
Sounds right to me. Yeah, I think so. And I do think it's useful to understand there's two different phases maybe of estimating your open access spend. One would be a rough back of the envelope estimate. So to do that for a number of publishers, for example, or to understand your order of magnitude on how much you're spending on PLOS. And then another would be the detailed level that you have to get to if you actually want to make an agreement about covering your APC costs. And I think at that level you need a lot more accuracy, and it's also worth investing the time in getting that accuracy. And so I think it's useful to know where you are on that spectrum of amount of time to invest in accuracy, because it is something right now where it does take time to get something that's really accurate, but maybe you're just looking for a ballpark.
And it appears there's one last question that came in through the chat. Do you have any figures about how much the average of APCs?
It's a good question. I don't right now. There have been a few papers about it, and I think it might be on the Open APC site. I don't remember. I think it varies a lot by discipline as well.
It varies by discipline and by journal type for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think with that, Heather, we thank you very much for your presentation. And I'd like to thank everyone for attending this NASIG session. This recording will be posted on our YouTube channel in the coming weeks. And Heather will be moderating the NASIG forum through June 2020 for any questions not covered during the session. Please join us again in about 10 minutes for Control-Alt Repeat Strategies for Regaining Authority Control After a Migration. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.